So you want to get the AWS Certified Solution Architect Professional certification. Let me guess, you want to get it so you can brag, huh? That's okay. In this video, I'm going to go over all the details of the Solution Architect Professional certification that you need to know to prepare and pass your exam. This is the landing page for the AWS Certified Solution Architect Professional certification, and let's go over some details here. So once you achieve this certification, this validates your ability to design, deploy, and evaluate applications on AWS within diverse, complex requirements. The professional level certifications are tough, and the Solution Architect Professional certification is going to take some work to pass it. And once you pass it, you will feel a very big sense of accomplishment, that's for sure. Let me just go over some of the particulars here in the exam. The length of the exam is 180 minutes, that's 3 hours. The cost of the exam is $300 US. So when you go into this thing, this is not an exam that you want to go in half prepared and fail, because you'll be $300 out of pocket. The format is 75 questions. That's a mix of multiple choice as well as multiple response. Okay. Now we're going to jump into the exam guide and get more into detail in terms of who the target candidate is for this exam. Okay, let's see who this exam is really for. This exam is going to validate your ability to design and deploy dynamically scalable, highly available, fault-tolerant, and reliable applications. Does that sound familiar? That's straight from the well-architected framework. You need to be able to select the appropriate AWS services to design and deploy an application based on given requirements. You need to be able to migrate complex multi-tier applications to AWS. You need to know how to design and deploy enterprise-wide scalable operations on AWS and implement cost control strategies. Target candidate. Typically, you should have 2 or more years of experience designing and deploying architectures on AWS. The target candidate has the ability to evaluate cloud application requirements and make architectural recommendations for implementation, deployment, and provisioning applications on AWS. The target candidate is capable of providing best practice guidance on architectural design spanning multiple applications and projects or an enterprise. So think of this similar to Solution Architect Associate, but the complexity in what's called upon you on this exam is just going to go a lot deeper across more projects, and the scale of the projects you work on in these scenarios are just going to be a lot bigger in scope. Your recommended AWS knowledge. Target candidates should have the following knowledge: be able to explain and apply the 5 pillars of the AWS well-architected framework. There are actually 6 pillars now. An additional pillar known as sustainability was added in December of 2021, but this exam is still going to reference the 5 pillars. Map business objectives to application and architecture requirements. When you build something, great solution architects always align the business objective and the business objectives and work backwards from there to determine what the architecture requirements are to achieve those business objectives, which of course will yield those business outcomes. You need to be able to design hybrid architectures using AWS key technologies and architect CI/CD processes. What is out of scope for the target candidate? These are things that will not be on the exam. Machine learning, Amazon Game Lift is not going to be up here. Front-end development for mobile apps, not going to be on here. 12-factor app methodology, out of scope. In-depth knowledge of operating systems, out of scope. Not going to be talking about enterprise applications on this. Not going to need to know about database schemas for high-scale persistent data stores. None of that. Okay, I mentioned earlier that this is multiple choice and multiple response. So multiple choice is 1 correct response and 3 incorrect responses, known as distractors. Multiple response will have at least 2 or more correct responses out of 5 or more options to answer. Now, I do want to call your attention to something known as unscored content. This particular professional exam will have 10 unscored questions. You're not going to know what they are, but they're going to be sprinkled about those 75 questions. If you get those wrong, they don't account against your score. But again, make the best effort to get them all right because you don't know which one those questions are. Exam results from 100 to 1,000 is the range of the score. For this, you need 750 out of 1,000 points to pass. A lot of the associate level certifications only require you to get 720 points. This one here, 750. This is the big leagues now. We're professional status, so this is how it's going to be. Now, this is, I want to migrate on here to the domains because this is really how the exam is going to be laid out. There are 5 domains with the percentages of material that the test will be based on. So domain 1 is designing for organizational complexity. That's 12.5% of the total exam. Domain 2 is design for new solutions. Domain 3 is migration planning, which is 15%. And let me just back up a second. Design for new solutions, let me call out, that's going to be 31% of the exam. So almost 1/3 of the exam is going to be on designing for new solutions. Domain 4, cost control, 12.5%. And domain 5 is continuous improvement, 29%. Again, almost 1/3 of the exam will be based on continuous improvement. Now what I'm going to do is go through each domain in detail. Like I say, with these exam guides, you don't want to start studying unless you know what is going to be on this thing. And nothing maps out what's going to be on the exam better than the exam guides. So domain 1, design for organizational complexity. Bullet point 1.1, determine cross-account authentication and access strategy for complex organizations. This is very common for large companies, in particular enterprise companies, trying to figure out their cross-account authentication strategies and how their staff is going to access their AWS resources. You need to be able to analyze an organizational structure, evaluate the current authentication infrastructure, analyze the AWS resources at an account level, and determine an auditing strategy for the authentication and access. Bullet point 1.2 is determine how to design networks for complex organizations. And you need to be able to outline IP addressing strategies for the VPC, determine the DNS strategy, classify the network traffic and security, determine connectivity needs for the hybrid environments, and determine a way to audit network traffic. So this isn't a networking certification per se, but you do need to have knowledge of how to design networking. You can't get around this stuff because this is very important. This is a fundamental construct for which your application architectures will be built on top of. Bullet point 1.3 is determine how to design a multi-account AWS environment for complex organizations. Determine how to use AWS organizations. AWS organizations is very important for laying out your AWS multi-account strategy, not only just for the consolidated billing, but for how you're going to set up all your organizational units to use AWS. You need to be able to implement the most appropriate account structure for proper cost allocation, agility, and security. That goes to the point of how are you going to lay out your OUs and how are you going to divvy out production and lower test and dev environments. You need to be able to recommend a central audit and event notification strategy and decide on an access strategy to AWS and all your resources. Moving along to domain 2, design for new solutions. This is worth a hefty portion of the exam. I believe it was 31%. Bullet point 2.1, determine security requirements and controls when designing and implementing a solution. Implement infrastructure as code. This is fundamental to automation and DevOps. Determine prevention controls for large-scale web applications. Determine the roles and responsibilities within those applications. Determine a secure method to manage credentials for the solutions and applications. Enable detection controls and security services for large-scale applications. Enforce host and network security boundaries, and be able to enable encryption in transit and at rest. So this goes to the security piece of it. Bullet point 2.2, determine a solution design and implementation strategy to meet reliability requirements. You see a common theme here? This is directly based on the well-architected framework, and within those frameworks, these are deep requirements for which you need to know. So for the reliability requirements, you need to be able to design a highly available application environment. So you'll get questions that test your knowledge in that particular area. Determine advanced techniques to detect for failure and service recoverability. Determine process and components to monitor and recover for regional service disruptions from regional failovers. This is all great stuff. This is going to help you so much in the real world when you get out there and you're working for your customers and the clients that hire you to do this stuff. Bullet point 2.3, determine a solution designed to ensure business continuity. Architect an automated cost-effective backup solution that supports business continuity across multiple AWS regions, and also determine an architecture that provides application and infrastructure availability in the event of service disruption. Bullet point 2.4, determine a solution designed to meet performance objectives, which includes designing internet scale application architectures, designing an architecture for performance according to business objectives, and applying design patterns to meet business objectives with caches, buffering, and replicas. So this is all about performance. When you build large applications for large companies or even startups that have a popular service that all of the internet is going to come knocking on the door, you need to be able to scale these applications out. So that particular bullet point will focus on that in the exam. Bullet point 2.5, determine a deployment strategy to meet business requirements when designing and implementing a solution. So that's determining a resource provisioning strategy to meet business objectives, determine a migration process to change the version of a service, determine services to meet deployment strategy, and determine patch management strategy. Moving on to domain 3, migration planning. I've done a number of migrations over the years, and migrations can become very complex, and this area is going to focus on making sure that you're ready to migrate applications from outside of AWS, whether it's from another cloud provider into AWS or from on-premises in data centers or co-located environments into AWS. Bullet point 3.1, select existing workloads and processes for potential migration to the cloud. Complete an application migration assessment. Classify applications according to the 6 R's. That's rehost, replatform, repurchase, refactor, retire, and retain. Let me know down in the comments below if you'd like to see a video on the 6 R's. This is great stuff, especially when you have many applications and you're trying to figure out what to do with them. Those 6 R's and categorizing your applications using that nomenclature will help big time. Bullet point 3.2, select migration tools and or services for new and migrated solutions based on detailed AWS knowledge, meaning you need to select the appropriate database transfer mechanism. How are you going to migrate a database into AWS? Select the appropriate database transfer service. I'll tell you a good one to use, DMS, Database Migration Service is a great one. Select the appropriate data transfer target, select an appropriate server migration mechanism, and apply appropriate security methods to migration tools. Bullet point 3.3, determine a new cloud architecture for an existing solution. So this would be refactoring. Evaluate business applications and determine the target cloud architecture breakdown and functionality of applications into services, and determine the target database platforms. Bullet point 3.4, determine a strategy for migrating existing on-premises workloads to the cloud, and determine the desired prioritization strategy of the organization. Analyze data volume and rate of change to determine a data transfer strategy. Evaluate cutover strategies. Assess internal and external compliance requirements for that successful migration. Moving right along to domain 4, cost control. Bullet point 4.1, select a cost-effective pricing model for a solution. Purchase resources based on usage requirements and identify when to use different storage tiers. In AWS, there are a number of ways to solve the same problem. And knowing that gives you great opportunity and flexibility to figure out not only how you can build the architecture, but how you can build it and make sure that it's cost optimized at the same time. Okay? And you can do that in a number of ways. Bullet point 4.2, determine which controls to design and implement that will ensure cost optimization, including determine an AWS generated cost allocation tag strategy that allows mapping to cost to business units, determine a mechanism to monitor when underutilized resources are present, determine a way to manage commonly deployed resources to achieve governance, define a way to plan costs that do not exceed the budget amount. Then bullet point 4.3, identify opportunities to reduce cost in an existing architecture. So this is a cost optimization exercise. I do this very frequently, looking at my customers' architectures and finding opportunities to improve their cost optimization in existing workloads. Determine which services are most cost effective in meeting those business objectives. Domain 5, final domain, continuous improvement for existing solutions. Bullet point 5.1, troubleshoot solutions architectures. That includes assessing an existing application architecture for deficiencies, such as what you would find when you do well-architected reviews. Analyze the application and infrastructure logs. Test possible solutions in a non-production environment. Bullet point 5.2, determine a strategy to improve an existing solution for operational excellence. Again, if you look closely at these bullet points and these different domains, you can see the well-architected framework all over this. This is really what the solution architect exams are about. And again, the difference between an associate and the pro is the pro just goes way deeper, and the architectures you're assessing and building are more complex. Determine the most appropriate logging and monitoring strategy. Recommend the appropriate AWS offerings to enable configuration management, automation. Bullet point 5.3, determine a strategy to improve the reliability of an existing solution. There you go, reliability. Again, it's another pillar of the well-architected framework. Go ahead and do yourself a favor. Read the well-architected framework ASAP. It's about 70 pages last time I checked. I know, it's 70 pages. It's going to help you immensely. Read it. Trust me, it's going to help you big time on this exam. Okay, where were we? Evaluate existing architecture to determine areas that are not sufficiently reliable. Okay, yeah. Evaluate existing architectures to determine areas that are not sufficiently reliable. Remediate single points of failure. Enable data replication, self-healing, and elastic features and services. Self-healing architectures. This is one of many benefits of building applications in the AWS cloud. And then also testing the reliability of the new solution. Don't just deploy it. Make sure you test it as well. Bullet point 5.4, determine a strategy to improve the performance of an existing solution, which includes reconciling the current performance metrics against the performance targets, identifying and examining performance bottlenecks, and recommending and testing potential remediation solutions. Bullet point 5.5, determine a strategy to improve the security of an existing solution, including evaluating the AWS Secrets Manager strategy, auditing the environment for the security vulnerabilities, and enabling manual and/or automated responses to the detection of those vulnerabilities. Bullet point 5.6, determine how to improve the deployment of an existing solution, including evaluating appropriate tooling to enable infrastructure as code. There you see infrastructure as code again. Evaluating current deployment process for improvement opportunities, testing automated deployment and rollback strategies. And now we are at the end of the exam guide. The appendix is great. The appendix always includes key tools, technologies, and concepts that may be covered on the exam. This will be a list of areas as well as services in AWS that you can take a look at. I'm not going to go through these line by line, but I will be linking the document here down below in the description, so take a look at that. If you're not already subscribed, please subscribe to the Thoughtful Techie Cloud YouTube channel. I talk about AWS Cloud best practices. I talk about well-architected tips, and help you on your journey of learning AWS Cloud to not only help you pass certifications, but to help you use this stuff in the real world by sharing my insights with you that I've gathered over the years. So go ahead and hit the subscribe. Go ahead and leave me a comment down below, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care.